Red Chrome Cargo is a free pre-made scenario provided by the creators of Cyberpunk Red, and I will link where you can find this in the description below. This was originally released with the Jumpstart kit, but it's been converted so you can play it with the core rules. But is it any good? I'm XPLovecat, and I love to talk about RPGs. Feel free to subscribe if you do too. So this scenario starts out with a scream sheet, which is basically just a newspaper in this lore, and it's something that you can physically give your players for them to get the setup of the scenario. In this case, it talks about the gang war going on between the Ironsights and the Red Chrome Legion. It's pretty quickly that you meet a well-known fixer named Hornet, and he gives your players a job to be able to secure some cargo that were stolen by the Red Chrome Legion. I want to start off by setting some expectations about this scenario. It's not very long and does not have a ton of depth to it. It's very much intended to be an introduction to the system, both for the players and for the GM. So particularly for a game master who has not played this system before, it's kind of nice to play a pre-made just to not worry about moving plot forward and just focusing on learning the core mechanics. It's also a great introduction for the players, so I do recommend it for that reason. But there are a couple things that I think can be added to spice up the scenario a little bit. So moving forward, there will be spoilers, as I share my best tips for GMs wanting to run this scenario. I think it's important that you do take the time to set the expectations with your players that this is just an introduction scenario and that you plan to finish it within one session. It should only take your players about 2 to 3 hours to complete. I really think it's important to use this kind of as an introduction to test the waters and use it as a little teaser for your players to make sure that they enjoy the system. I also think it's cool to take them from the beginning of getting a job or a mission all the way to the end so they can get some improvement points and learn how to do that as well. It's also important for you to point out that you will be looking up rules and combat might be a little bit slow, but you guys are all learning together and it will get faster as you get used to the system. So as you get into the scenario, my first recommendation is to make sure that you explain what a fixer is when Hornet is introduced. So a fixer is an actual role that maybe one of your PCs have chosen to play. However, it might not be something that they know of. So it's important to kind of explain the universe a little bit and get them engrossed in it. And you can look up details in the core rulebook if you want more on what a fixer is. Now, really the only thing that I added to this scenario was an encounter before the players get to Hornet's trains. This is just as a little bit of a quick combat to get your feet wet and understand how it's going to go when players actually get to the trains. This in particular, I liked using a couple of muggers who are just trying to take their money. You can use the booster ganger stats in the core rulebook for this, but you could really do anything like someone that is suffering from cyberpsychosis, or maybe they just stumble upon a market. Anything really to just get them a little bit more immersed in the world before they get right to the train. Now, when they do get to the trains, which in this scenario, basically you're going to have your players go from Hornet's train and it's running parallel to the train holding the cargo. These players are going to have to jump from Hornet's train over to this parallel train. Now, these trains are moving out into a more deserted area of Night City, so I would really take the time to describe what your characters are seeing here. It's a good opportunity to kind of get them more immersed in the world and say, maybe they're heading towards a darker area of town that they've never been to, but they've heard rumors about. Or maybe they're heading away from the city and you can see the skyscrapers get smaller and the hustle and bustle gets quieter as you just hear the train tracks heading out towards this abandoned part of town. It's really an opportunity to paint a picture for your characters and get them involved in the world. The next thing I would do is make sure that you describe how the players might be feeling. These characters probably haven't jumped from a train before and is probably experiencing a bit of an adrenaline rush. So I think it'd be good to describe that to your players and say they might be experiencing some fear. But you as a GM know that they're not actually going to fall off this train. There is a difficulty value that they have to pass in an athletics check. However, if they don't pass it, they still grab hold of the train, but it basically removes stealth for being an option for them. So that's just something to keep in mind, that there's no fear of them actually falling to their death, but rather if they're able to stealth or if they have to go loud. Once they get to the second train and go through the hatch, there is a map provided for this train, which I had no problem with. It worked great. So once your players get in there and fight a couple guards and get to the second area, there is an opportunity that if you have a net runner in your group, they have something they can jack into. I think it's really important that you point this out directly to your player just to make sure they know that it's an option for them and to be thinking about it as they continue to play through the system. If you don't have a net runner in your group, then your players will likely go to the last section of the train where the cargo actually is. There's going to be some combat that you'll have to work through, and your players will have to come up with some way to disable the turret. But then they're left with trying to get that cargo back to Hornet. Now, there's a couple ways that's described in the scenario which they can do this, but you can also let them be creative, or if need be, you can just point them to a couple of different ways that they could go about it. Either way, the main goal is to get that cargo back to Hornet, which I suggest doing in that first session. Once the cargo is back in Hornet's hands, there's different things that could happen. You could either just follow the scenario and what they have. Essentially, they write out that the Iron Sights have enough of their tech and poisons to take down the Red Chrome Legion. And that's basically how it ends. But there's also a couple of different things you could do if you wanted to expand on this first scenario. The first thing is maybe it's not enough. Maybe the Iron Sights need more to take over this other gang. And you make this into a bigger all-out war, and maybe your players have to choose a side and get involved in some way for this happening in the universe. The other thing you can do is maybe Hornet becomes a more important and prominent NPC in your campaign. And they has several different missions that your players can go on and maybe eventually becomes part of his crew. Maybe he has to ask you to get some cyberware or maybe some more chemicals for his neurotoxin that he's working on. Any of those things that would lead into a next scenario for your players to continue in this universe and use some of the NPCs they're already familiar with. So there you have it. That's my recommendation for Red Chrome Cargo. I think it's a great introduction scenario. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions while you're preparing to run this. But let me know, have you already run this? And if you have, how is your experience? If you like content on Cyberpunk Red, please let me know by liking and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.